Well, good morning. Good morning to everyone. Good to see everybody here this morning and chatting with one another, enjoying one another's company already. We're into week number 5 of this series. I think we'll wrap it up next week, week 6. But we're in week 5 of this series that I titled Uncomfortable. And have some good thoughts going into week 5, but sometimes I get up here and I'm looking at my thought. I'm trying to go back through my notes before we start, and I find myself going, all right, I've got a lot of good thoughts here this week, but what's my point? Sometimes you go, all right, I got a lot of good stuff here, I think. Well, what's going to be the point? I think we've kind of started a point in the previous weeks and really looking at our willingness to maybe be uncomfortable and embrace uncomfortable for God's eternal kingdom. I would say maybe that's just kind of sum everything up of what we've been talking about. And I get pretty uncomfortable with these 95, 100 degree temperatures in late September. And we're all ready to cool off a little bit, but it looks like maybe some relief could be coming this week. We've talked about being uncomfortable for the sake of being used, growing, all these different things that we've talked about for the sake of God's eternal kingdom. And we've looked at several examples. We've talked about several people that God has used that we can read about, that we can study about, that God used throughout the Bible to accomplish really some of His biggest missions. Not really some of His biggest missions. I feel like all of His biggest missions were accomplished by people that He pulled out of their comfort zones, ordinary people, okay? Like me and you sitting here this morning. You just kind of go, I'm really a very ordinary person. I'm a nobody. I'm just kind of, all right? And that's, God majors in using those kind of people to accomplish His missions. We talked a few weeks ago about He really doesn't have any other option, does He? I mean, we're all that He has to work with in terms of accomplishing His mission here on this earth. We talked about some of the uncomfortable things that come at us, and we all have those. We could all sit here and tell stories about our past week, our past month. We have these uncomfortable things that come at us. And so much about what we can do for God's eternal kingdom is reliant upon our response, how we perceive those things that come at us. It's about our response. And I asked a question, I think last week. How do you react when God tries to pry you out of your comfort zone? And I really do not think that it matters. We've talked about this as well. We've got all sorts and kinds of different ages just littered throughout the auditorium here this morning. It doesn't matter your age. God continues to try to pry us out of our comfort zone so that He can use us, because it's difficult to use people who are really, really comfortable and relaxed and in their comfort zone. I wish it were different. I wish we could just be kicked back and relaxed and comfortable as possible, and that everything was just beautiful and nice and played out really, really well. We've talked about that as well, but that's just not where we're at. God created this earth originally as just the perfect place, but at some point, I don't know why, you don't know why, at some point sin entered this world, and And then it was not just absolutely perfect. God's creation was perfect. But we deal with sin in this world. We deal with the difficulties that come at us in this world. So maybe I should ask this. In this past week, maybe run this drill real quick. Go backwards. Go backwards. Yesterday, Saturday, Friday, Thursday, Wednesday, Tuesday. Okay? How did you react when God tried to pry you out of your comfort zone? Some of us go, I don't know that God tried to. Well, wait a second. Yeah, wait a second. Maybe that thing that bubbled up on Tuesday, man, I didn't perceive that as God trying to pry me out of my comfort zone so that He could use me to do whatever. Okay?
That's just it. You don't get up every morning and say, what is God calling me today? But He'll be doing that all day long. You won't even know.
That's right. Mr. Schubert's just talking about it's difficult. It's hard for us to realize what's happening almost daily, probably daily. And so I asked that next question. Do we recognize when He does try to pry us out of our comfort zone so that He can use us to do something that's not just earthly? That's how we work in our mind, is just we wake up in the morning, we're not thinking about this. We're thinking about, how can I arrange my day for it to go perfect and smooth and relaxing and comfortable for me. We think selfishly in terms of me, and how can I arrange my day for it to be the most comfortable that I can make it, right? Don't we all do that without even thinking about it? From the time that we go in there and hit start on the coffee maker, because, man, my body needs this coffee and I need to ease into the morning. Can't tell you how many times people have called me early in the morning. What are you doing? Well, I'm trying to ease into the morning with my coffee here. That's just all. I just want it peaceful and nothing too big to happen yet. It's not even 7:30 yet. I just need things to be calm and easy and simple. Okay?
And along with that, Kurt, I don't think, and I don't mean to get off track here, but
All right.
I've got to say this.
It's okay.
I don't think people plan their day to sin.
No, I agree with that. Yeah.
Just like we don't plan, we don't know God's plan for us that day. I don't think that people plan to sin.
Fall into sin or whatever.
And it happens.
I agree with that. I think probably along those same lines, I think it's just very difficult for us to wake up in the morning and realize what our eternal purpose is. I mean, God didn't just create you, put you here to just, hey, I want you to enjoy this experience as much as you can, and I want you to be on easy street, and that's it. Okay?
I used to tell girls in the cabin at camp, God didn't put you here just to look pretty and have fun.
Just to look pretty and have fun. That's right. And it seems to be the goal for I'm at the high school campus every day, and that seems to be the goal of every one of those kiddos, right? Well, I mean, they're young, and we were all there at one point in time, and we understand that well, don't we? We talked about this a few weeks ago. Your willingness to leave your comfort zone is directly related to your potential to impact others for God's eternal kingdom. Prove me wrong. Argue that that's wrong. The longer I live, the more I believe that, the more I understand that. And we're going to kind of focus as we go on through today. So far we've talked about, you remember a few weeks ago we talked about some of God's people that He used to create some really big impacts. We talked about Joseph, you remember that. We talked about Moses. We talked about Mary, the mother of Christ. We talked about Paul. We talked about Paul. And we, as we talked about those people, and we kind of wrapped all that up, we said, you know, most of us aren't sitting here today with God talking to us through a burning bush, wanting us to go lead the Israelites out of Egypt and all that kind of impact. We all go, "Oh, that seems so distant. That was so long ago. That was so different world than what we live in today." But we're going to talk a little bit about today how we still, in some you might consider some smaller missions, have the opportunity to impact others for God's eternal kingdom. And it's still, even though it might be a smaller version of what we've been discussing, it's still, a lot of the time, pretty uncomfortable for us. There are things that try to pry us out of our comfort zone. And really, we get opportunities every day. We just talked about this. I asked you to rewind, look through your last week. Okay, go back in your mind and the week that you just lived, and those things that were coming at you. How did you perceive those things? What was your perception of the things that came at you? Did you consider them to be difficulties, inconveniences, things that stressed you, things that made you way uncomfortable? Or did you perceive those things as opportunities to serve, to encourage, to help, to inspire, a lot of times there are things that we don't even really, you know, there's, in my line of work, we've had this guy who works in our, I'm just going to say in our school district, and a lot of us have perceived him so far, he hadn't been with us long, a lot of us have perceived him so far as being kind of lazy and kind of, you know, we joke and go, "Man, he took a 5-minute work. Now he's got to get back to break," you know, and all that kind of stuff. And so it's been kind of common for us to visit with each other and joke, "Hey, did you see? Oh, what's this?" You know, and this guy has complained a lot and he's whined a lot and all this kind of stuff. And he even actually threatened to leave. He told us he was leaving, about to put his 2 weeks notice and all that kind of stuff. But in the past couple of weeks, he decided not to leave us. He decided to stay. In the past couple of weeks, I've seen him working a lot harder for some reason, you know. And I thought just the other night, I saw him and asked him to do something, and he did it. He was on it. He was working hard. And I walked away and I thought, why haven't I sent him an email or a text or something just to encourage him and go, "Hey, I see what you're doing and I appreciate it, and you're working hard and you're doing a great job." You know, that's something that's really simple from my end that probably would do a whole lot for him. Would probably do a whole lot for him, because I don't know what all's going on in his life. I don't know what he's dealing with. I don't know what's created his mentality. But there are all these opportunities that come at us throughout the week that sometimes we don't even think about, not even touch the tip of the iceberg, that give us opportunities to love, help, serve. Yes, ma'am, go ahead.
Especially as I was raising my kids, I was really quick to criticize when they did something wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And I was slow to encourage when they did the right.
Absolutely. That's our nature.
We see the wrong so much clearer than we do
Yeah.
the right.
That's our nature. And we're going to maybe get to some of that at the end of today. Maybe, I don't know, maybe at the beginning of next week we'll get to some of that. But I agree. That's our nature, is to recognize what is wrong far more than we look for what is right.
We expect
We expect people to do
had
right.
2 months of absolute frustration. And I was really down, but my darling little son-in-law here says to me, Mom, remember, he won't give you more than you can handle.
Mhm.
And I think that did more to jar me out of my negative.
Mindset, negative mindset. We all go to that place way too often, and keeping that positive mindset is so much about being able to serve. Kelvin?
Gotta have a positive attitude.
Mhm.
Romans 8:31, God is for us, who can be against us?
Mhm.
And that should help us get through a lot of thinking, a lot of stuff.
Absolutely.
Whatever. And,
Kelvin's talking about God's with us, who can be against us. If you just keep that positive mindset, keep on walking with and in step with God, then there's really nothing that can come at us that we can't overcome. We talked a few weeks ago, okay, and I'm trying to transition here from some of these bigger missions that we talked about, God prying some of the biggest missions that he needed to accomplish. He went after some of these people that he had to pry absolutely, totally out of their comfort zone to really just, let's boil that back down to what we face and what we deal with every day. And we talked a few weeks ago about if we're too comfortable, if that's all we're chasing is comfort, what does that create? What does that mean for us? And I've mentioned that it means oftentimes we become unavailable. Okay? I still think in my mind that the older generations that sit in this room, I don't know, I just feel like they're more available, were taught to be more available than the younger generations that not so many are in this room. But I just think about the simple things of serving others, helping others, offering your time to others. From what I understood out of my grandparents and maybe even great-grandparents, far more available to serve, to help, to give of their time, to encourage. I feel like with each passing year, with each passing decade, younger generations are moving further and further away from this, from being available for God to use, okay, even in the simplest of measures. So we want to talk about service over selfishness. That's really what it boils down to, okay? And you could draw up 100 different scenarios that give you the opportunity to serve or to be selfish in terms of, I think I've mentioned before, just a very simple, there's a funeral, there's a family that's getting together over at the fellowship building before the funeral, and they need food, and you have the opportunity to make a meal to go help serve that family that is dealing with a loss in a very tough time. Okay? How often do we get presented with that? Most of us men are just kind of like, I'm out, I don't know, my wife, But us men can do things to help in that kind of circumstance as well. Do I ignore that? Do I just, I don't have time to, that's probably not that's not me. Or do we jump right in and go, I'm willing to go do that. I'm willing to go serve. I'm willing to help out. Matthew chapter 20. In Matthew chapter 20, Jesus he's kind of asked by a mother a request from a mother that does not understand Jesus' eternal kingdom, okay? She asked for her sons to be put right up there at the top of the kingdom of what they think the kingdom's going to look like, to try to be exalted. She wants her sons to sit at the right and the left of the king on the throne, be in the best position, get the most likes on Twitter, to get, just popular, famous, in the spotlight. And Jesus says, you do not understand what you're asking. Isn't that an interesting response? Because she probably went, what are you talking about? Here we are a couple thousand years later, and it's pretty easy for us to understand what Jesus was saying to her. You don't understand what you're asking. My kingdom is not about, my kingdom is not going to be about popularity. And I think that's one of the biggest issues with younger generations, younger people today when we talk about all this stuff. It seems that they strive, that they look for opportunities to be more liked, more popular, more in the spotlight, more out in front, and it's really contrary to God's eternal kingdom. It's really contrary to that. It's difficult for us to understand that. Even as parents and as grandparents, when we look at our kiddos, that's often where we find ourselves falling in line. Boy, I really want this for my grandchild. I really want this for my kiddo. If this doesn't happen, if we don't get this, if we don't do that, does everybody understand what I'm saying? And really it's contrary to what God's eternal kingdom is about. God's eternal kingdom is about being humble. And this right here, Jesus' response when he tells his disciples, just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve. Okay? Even Jesus and his eternal purpose was not to be served, but it was to serve others, to help others, to be inconvenienced, to slow down and look out for the interest of others. And we see that probably in the best way in John 13. When Jesus, just before the Passover, Jesus washes his disciples' feet. Okay? Why do you think he did that? Just before, he knew his time had come. He knew what was about to transpire. He knew what was about to happen in the next week. Why do you think he slowed down and just washed his disciples' feet?
An example to them.
Dodie says an example to them. And I agree. That was his probably as big a thing as you could do for someone else, just in terms of humbling yourself, getting down on a knee, washing their feet. To say it's not about how much can I be served, how much can people do for me. And we fall into that trap every week, don't we? We fall into that trap every week. I do. I'm talking to myself, okay? You quickly wake up in the morning and you think, how can today be arranged to where people can do a lot for me and help me out and make my week go great? And Jesus is showing an example to his disciples right here that it's really about serving others. It's about, I want you to know before I leave this earth what you guys need to be about, is what he's telling them. Tiffany?
I was just thinking, most cases, the people that you're cooking for aren't gonna know that you specifically cooked that meal for them. So we can't only be seeking opportunities to serve where people are gonna know we did it and then seeking recognition in that, which can be a really easy trap to get into, I feel like. Like, look what I'm doing.
Yeah.
I agree. It's gotten easier also, just along the lines of what you're talking about. I think in the day and age of social media, there's a lot that people do, and they feel like they need to snap a selfie or take a picture and then post it out there that, boy, so proud to have served, and it does lead you to go, what was their real intention here? Which we're moving towards that as well, about actions over just our intentions. Our intentions are, you can think of a lot of analogies and sayings about intentions, but our actions, and just that alone, our actions are so important. Not just what we talk about, what we intend to do.
I'm going to speak as one of those older generations.
Okay?
We talk a lot about the younger generations and they're going. But if you look back when I was young and in school, there was still the popularity thing. We wanted to be popular and we wanted to be pretty.
Yes, ma'am.
It's not a new thing. And I think a lot of the surveys that you see in the older generation is a time consideration. We don't have as many responsibilities and as many constraints, not necessarily self-imposed, but just life-imposed, that we have to do, that we have a little more time to commit to doing other service. There's some of these young folks that are working full-time, taking care of children, sometimes taking care of parents and other things. I do see the need to recognize that they need to work service into their life
Mhm.
and be considerate. You can be considerate of other people and take care of other people and serve.
It's definitely, it's hard to compare a generation that grew up in the, again, I always go back to my grandparents, okay? They grew up in the 30s and the 40s. It's hard to compare that generation to today because there's just so much different. But again, there's this thing in my mind that goes with every invention, with every direction and step that we take to try to make our lives more comfortable. It sure feels like that we encourage that next generation to be more unavailable. Okay? I don't know if that makes sense. But again, we've listed it before. We've talked about it. I think I could probably, I'm not as up on cutting edge technology as I should be, but I think there's probably even a deal, and Jeremy, you can probably tell me or not, but if I had a smartphone on my, or a little smartwatch, I could probably punch it and tell my house to turn the air conditioner down to 70 degrees so that when I get home in an hour, it's cooled off, and I've talked about in here, about things like Carrie loves heated seats in our car. That's, boy, would my grandparents have ever thought in the 1930s that they would have heated seats in their car? And we could go on and on and on. I set my coffee maker for the precise time in the morning that I want it to start. And all those things are just designed to make us more comfortable and things to be easier. And there seems to be this tug of war with what God's very nature is and what our very nature is that's in conflict, that if we're not careful, it makes us very much unavailable. It makes us very much unmotivated as we're working towards. But
Kirk, the most important thing too, I think about as young couples, are gonna grow up to help me. You know what I'm saying? I see
Mm-hmm. It is. It's the generational thing is what you're
And those-
referring to.
Those young parents may not be out cooking a meal, but they're teaching their kids.
It doesn't take long. It's just a 2 or 3 generational thing of how we teach our kiddos to think. And if we're not careful and we fall into this category of just being unavailable and all about comfort and chasing everything that the world has to offer today, then fast forward 20 years, and now we've got another generation that is even less available and less motivated and less about serving in God's eternal kingdom. This is from Mark chapter 9, another, Jesus trying to explain to his disciples that it is not about being at the top and being in the spotlight and being the most popular and being, you fill in the blank. He sat down and called the 12 and he said to them, if anyone would be first, anyone that wants to be first at the top, he must first be last and a servant of all. Okay? So contrary to the way we tend to think, the way we wake up every morning, the way our kids, grandchildren wake up every morning and what they think today. They do not think about, let's slow down, let's look for ways to serve. I've said it before, I've watched coaches on my coaching staff. Eddie Parker, he was on one of my coaching staff. He's not in here this morning, but I've watched us pull up to restaurants after football games and watch coaches almost literally run and elbow kids out of the way to go get in the front of the line to eat, and had to go, hey guys, we're gonna go back here and we're gonna hold the door open for our kiddos and we're gonna let them go eat, and when they're done going through, we'll go through, and just some of the simplest things of it's not about being first. We're gonna take care of others first. Go ahead.
I don't know if any of this makes sense to anybody, but you were talking about how kids nowadays aren't as available as the older generations. And I wonder if that's why AIs come in so much, because you don't have, the kids nowadays, the generation nowadays doesn't want to do things. So you've got your AIs coming in, doing stuff that kids should be doing or people should be doing.
Now, when you say AIs, are you talking artificial intelligence?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, goodness. Man, that's a whole nother. We could spend several months talking about that, couldn't we? It's scary sometimes when you look at some of those things that are now being taken over by things that ought to just be happening from people.
I wonder if parents
were
were freaked out about the calculator.
Way back in the day, you talking about back in the day? Probably.
I told my son,
Absolutely.
"Because I can't do this math," I said, "Don't worry about it. You're gonna
Don't
have a
worry.
calculator."
You're going to have a calculator that'll do it all for you, right?
I think a lot of this stems from generations ago, when I was a child, years ago. My parents wouldn't need to have a better life than what they have had. And I think this has carried through, only we've lost track
Yeah.
as we have matured of what is important and what is not
Yeah,
in our struggles for our children to have more than we have.
I agree. She's talking about how every generation wants their children to have it a little bit better, a little bit more convenient, a little more whatever you want to call it than they had it, which is fine in nature, I believe, but if you do not keep God's precepts in order and in mind. And I go back and I think about probably the last series I taught in here was a series on the Ten Commandments. And we talked about, what was it? Is it the fourth or the fifth? Sorry. Children obey your parents. No. Honor your father and mother, right? Honor your father and mother. And kind of goes to what you're speaking of. That doesn't seem to be all that big of a deal until it is, you know, and what we're talking about today, and this generation passing on to the next. And that was a commandment with a promise. Honor your father and mother so that your days might be long in this land. Doesn't speak to and say that you're going to live for a long time. Doesn't say that, you know, Dodie is going to live to 105 because she honored her father and mother. Okay? It speaks to a country, a nation, that if we're a nation of people that their children honor their father and mother, then that's going to be a nation that will last, will stand the test of time because they're keeping things in the proper order. You're keeping things in the proper order of God's eternal kingdom. The more we move away from that, the more, and I just use that as an example, honoring your father and mother, but the more we move away from all those precepts of God's eternal kingdom, the tougher it is, I think, for us to set in the proper place, to be where God wants us to be. All right, I've got about 5 minutes left here. I'm trying to move along. Sorry. A lot of it is about this. I get to versus I have to. You know, that's a mindset. That's a perception. Those are the things that come at me throughout the week. And do they hit me hard? And I go, oh, my heavens, I've got to, and now I have to, you know. Versus, this is something that God has put in my path. Remember a few weeks ago we talked about making your father proud. Y'all remember that? And some of you may not have had a great relationship with your father, or your father wasn't in your life, and I hate that. But most of us really wanted to make our father proud. And maybe you still do today. Maybe your father's still alive. Mine is. And I still think I could talk about a lot of things that my thoughts in this. But at some point in time, you're going to stand before your Creator. You're going to stand in front of your Creator, right? And I feel like He's going to say, I gave you all these opportunities. I gave you all these things. Gave you a chance to do. Why did you turn this down? I gave you an opportunity. Why? Why did you quit? Why did you give up? Why did you... I don't know what that means, you know, in terms of our eternal existence. We're going to live with our Creator in eternity. If you've accepted Christ as your Savior, I'm thinking about, I think for too long I want to do a series on heaven and angels and eternity, okay? That's where we're going to spend the majority of our time, right? Everybody understand that? Yes. You go, oh, well, so-and-so back here, whoever is 88, you know, they're going to live to be 93 or what. I don't care who you are. You're going to spend by far the majority of your time in eternity with your Creator, okay? What does that look like exactly? I don't know. We'll explore that maybe at some other point in time. But I can't help but think our Creator at some point in time says, I gave you all these opportunities to serve. I gave you all these opportunities to help, to love, to give. Why did you Why'd you turn them down? What was it? Our Creator's still going to love us. But at some point in time, we probably answer for that as well. Ways to serve. They're countless, aren't they? I can start with Les and Zach back here at the back of the auditorium this morning, opening doors, welcoming people in. We've talked about cooking meals for people that are in need. Cleaning. She says that because we see her on Thursday mornings up here. She's cleaning. You're right, though. It's a good way to serve. Teaching Bible classes. There's classes going on upstairs. We could create the list that would be long, couldn't we? Okay. But I would challenge you to go, okay, what are you doing? Because there's a bunch of us in here, and it's different for everyone. It's different for everyone. And God designed it that way. So it's not supposed to be exactly the same for everybody. What are you doing to serve? What are you doing? Rewind. Look at your past week. And you go, well, man, that was going to inconvenience me. That's what we're talking about, right? That's the title of the whole series, Uncomfortable. Or we could call it Inconvenienced. Inconvenienced. Sarah?
I think that life has gotten so busy that it's not that you don't think about it and then go, that's going to inconvenience me, I'm just not going to do it. I think that the way the world is right now has made us so busy and just turned us into our own little circle. And it's not like we're going, that makes sense, I'm not going to do that, that we don't even notice that it's there.
I agree. She's just, it kind of goes back to intentions and actions. I didn't intend to ignore that. Okay? I understand that. And I know. Sarah's, and it applies to all of us. It's not you. It's not you. It's all of us. And that's where we're going. I'm not going to get there this morning. This was supposed to be a 6-week series. It might go to 7 weeks. I don't know. But feelings over, actions over feelings, actions over intentions. That's a really tough breaking point. We're going to talk more about feelings next week. We're supposed to talk about it this week. You guys listened way too slow. But my feelings, okay, there's a whole lot of, this generation, I got my feelings hurt. I don't feel like it. You fill in the blank. There's not too many, let me just tell you this, and we'll end with this. This might sound insensitive, but that's okay, I don't care. There aren't too many people that care a whole lot about how you feel. I mean, I say that and that's insensitive. I don't mean that in the sense that brothers and sisters in Christ won't come put an arm around you and love on you, okay? They're really more interested in what you do, your actions, okay? And we'll hit more on that next week. We're out of time. Sorry.
2 Peter chapter 1, read it, that hits right where you're talking.
All right, Kelvin's talking about 2 Peter. We'll that's some homework right there from Kelvin. 2 Peter chapter what?
2 Peter chapter 1.
Chapter 1. All right, thank you for your time. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening.